Hello. Hi, everyone. I hope we're live right now and very excited to start this session on how do you rock your interview. Before I go forward, let me just quickly introduce ourselves. So, my name is Sulinga and I am currently working as business partner in RB. I've been with RB for 3 years. I'm an avid reader, and at any point of time, you'll see me reading 2 or 3 books. So, that's about myself. Then let me introduce Mohit, who has 9 years of experience in the FMCG space. He is an avid traveler, he's a fitness enthusiast, and in his own words, he likes to be liked. So that's Mohit for you. Welcome, Mohit. Then we have Shikha here, who again has close to 9 years of experience in FMCG. And she was leading our talent acquisition for RB previously. And for the past 3 years, she's been business partnering with sales and corporate functions. And there's only one thing that gets her peace and nirvana, and that is food. So, welcome, Shikha, to this broadcast. And without further ado, I will quickly jump into the questions. So, how we're going to frame it is that we've got 8 or 9 most commonly asked questions around interviews, and I'm going to ask you, both of you, these questions. And at the end, if there are any other comments or questions from the audience, we can take those too. So, start. Yep. So, starting with the first and the most basic question, which will also get asked in any interview, is what is the best way to introduce yourself? Mohit, if you could pick that up for us and help us.
Okay, I think the best way to introduce anyone, Surika, is you need to be authentic and original. Uh, uh, I think if the interviewer is experienced, if the interviewer has had experience of meeting a lot of people, they would know when you are lying or when you are not being original, when you're not being genuine. So it's always helpful that you share who you are as a person. Uh, Talk about not just what your professional background is, but talk about what you like, what is it that makes you happy. These are personality traits that is always important to bring out when you're introducing yourself. Also, as a very practical tip, assume that on certain occasions that the interviewer may not have read your complete CV. So giving very broad outline of your career journey is always helpful. Don't get into too much of details, but give a broad overview so that it helps the interviewer get started. Whatever maybe generates interest, the interviewer will automatically then pick up that thread and start probing deeper.
Got it. Got it. So, what you're saying is that we talk about our personalities, what we've done apart from work, maybe. And just to share that, there was this interview I was doing, and this person told me about the blog she was running and which had around 5,000 followers. So, that really got me interested. And, I even asked her a few questions on that. So, again, and the tip on sometimes interviews may not have read your CV is also pretty right and just helps to give a basic outline. So thanks for
Absolutely.
that. Yeah. My next question is for Shikha. And Shikha, the question is that in this virtual world where most of us will be giving interviews via online medium, what is the role of our body language, and how do I ensure that I look and sound confident in front of my laptop?
I think great question, and it does hold true for virtual environment. I think it also holds true for even if you're meeting physically, right? Because body language says a lot more than what you would be saying verbally, right? I may be putting up my best answer verbally, but if my body language shows somebody that I'm not confident, my answer will be taken in a very different spirit. So I think the first and foremost is how you physically show yourself, which is how you dress up. So make sure you dress up smart. You dress up in something that you are comfortable in, because if your physical state is comfortable, only then will it reflect in what you are talking and how you are conversing with the person in front of you as well. Second, I think, especially given the virtual environment, because a lot of interactions now are happening online, it's important to ensure you keep your camera on, right? Because like we said, how you're physically, what your non-verbal cues show, give a lot of indication to the interviewer in terms of what you're thinking, what is going on in your mind, which in the virtual environment may not be as visible to us. So it's important for us to see you when you're talking, because it's always good to put a name to a face and then talk to an incumbent. So make sure you have your camera on. um, Make sure you sit in an area which has ample light, right? So that your area is well lit, you're very clearly visible, and you have no distractions in your background. So I think these are the basics, very practical tips that you should have, especially if you're giving a virtual interaction, which is the norm these days going forward. So make sure, so to summarize, make sure you dress smartly, you're comfortable with the way you are when you are giving your interaction. Make sure your background is clear of any distractions that you may have. Your cameras are on, and you're sitting in a well-lit area, because a well-lit area also gives you that inner enthusiasm and the spirit to be lively and talk rather than sitting in a dark area. So yeah.
Agreed. And on that note, Shikha, the sunlight on your face is completely
Right?
making your different from ours. So
Practice what you preach.
exactly. So yeah, thanks for that, Shikha. My next question to Mohit is that, when you get asked a question, there is so many things you want to talk about. How do you ensure that the conversation remains crisp, structured? At the same time, you're giving out the relevant details, but at the same time, you're not boring the hell out of the person. So how do you go about doing that?
So I think the step in that would be to listen to what is being asked. I think in my experience, sometimes you already have an answer playing at the back of your head, and you start fitting that answer to the question. And we may sometimes not pay ample attention to what the intent behind the question really is. So it's always also a good idea that if you want, you can always clarify the question, even paraphrasing, saying that, okay, so what I think you are trying to ask is XYZ, so that you're also able to structure, okay, this is how, this is what the intent of the interviewer is, and this is what I need to answer. Second thing I would say is examples always help. If you share more and more relevant examples, it builds in more conviction. Also, it helps the listener visualize. So that's point number two. The third is, if you can start by saying, okay, I would want to answer it with 3 points. Now you've already caught the attention of the listener, and the listener or the interviewer is now waiting for you to complete those 3 points. The listener is not confused, okay, when will this answer really end? It's now your own onus to make those 3 points count. So if someone says that, how would you approach a problem, and you can always say, so in my assessment, it can be done in 3 different ways, and always go in the order wherein your most important point is something that you explain first. Because if because of paucity of time, you're not able to complete all three, at least you've made your most important point. So structuring, listening well, and also paraphrasing or asking questions to understand the intent better. That's how you can always structure it right.
Agreed, Mohit, on, the three,
Linda,
four.
if I could
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
sorry,
please go ahead.
if I could just add to what Mohit said, specifically to your point that, how do you ensure you don't bore the incumbent sitting in front of you? Um, Whenever you're structuring, the points that Mohit said, you're going through those 1, 2, 3 steps. Make sure you're giving the summary what you're trying to say. You don't have to go into the detail of every point. If the interviewer wants to go into detail, he or she will himself ask you to pause and talk in a little bit more in detail of what you want to, right? So make sure you're giving the highlights, us talking about the overall achievements, what was your role to play, which is very important, right? Especially if it was a team project, do highlight what was your role to play and talk about that. And if we want to know the details, we will ask you for the details. Also, a good trick to make sure that you have put all your points across is to always ask the interviewer in the end that, I hope I've answered your question, or I hope that addresses your query. Because in case you've not been able to complete everything, and the interviewer asks you over that as well, that maybe XYZ thing was not clear, it just gives you another opportunity to talk about it a little bit more differently. So that is one trick that people could probably use in terms of just questioning back to ask the interviewer whether they've understood everything clearly.
Right, Shika. Thanks a lot for that. My next question is slightly related to what Mohit spoke about, the importance of sharing examples. So, Mohit, if you could help us understand that, how do you go about structuring your example? Because again, there is so much that you can talk about in that one particular incident. So, how do you make it crisp, especially an example?
Okay. So, one is, if anyone is interested, so there is an age-old model called the STAR model, uh, which is situation, task, action, and result. So if anyone's interested, you can always go back and read about the STAR model. But it always says that you need to have a overarching or thorough start to end of the example. So let me explain it with an example itself. If your CV says that I was instrumental in turning around the market share for a brand, let's say Mortine, taking Reckitt as an example. You should always start with the problem statement. What is the problem that was plaguing the brand when you took up the assignment or when this project was entrusted to you? When the problem came in front of you, how did you approach it? Then how did you get a buy-in from your relevant stakeholders to start working on it? Because you might have needed access to resources, you might have needed certain approvals. So how did you create that buy-in? Then once you were in the thick of things, were there any challenges that you faced? Was there a member of your team who was not responding well? Finally, what was really the result? Was it successful? Was it not successful? And how did you create a sustainable process which could exist even with you not being in the picture? That just completes the overall cycle from the problem to the sustainable solution. So that's how I would. Some of these aspects may apply to problems. Some of it may not apply. For example, if it was an individual contributor role, the problem with a team member may not have occurred. So you can drop that part. But broadly, these are the things that would help you structure the example better.
Right. Thanks a lot, Mohit. I think most of us would know about the STAR. For those who don't, you can simply Google it's STAR, and each of the letters stand for one particular abbreviation. So please go ahead and kind of look it up if you want to. I think one or two questions which always stump people, and I think interviewers like to torture people with, is how could you do this better? So even if you think you've done the best work of your life, I think it would just help to think of one or two things which could have been better in that particular situation. So maybe that is something you keep handy for each example that you're sharing. So moving on to my next question, and very important, Shikha, this is for you. So suppose I have a career gap. Now, this career gap could be because of any reason. Could be because I'm taking a break due to some family, problems. Could be due to maternity, mobility. I would want to study. I could have been unfortunately laid off, or I could even want to, travel for a few months or years and then want to start again. So, how do we go about explaining this to the interviewer without sounding defensive, like it's a fault that I have? So, how do we go about that?
I think honestly today the interviews are a lot more open to gaps in your resumes than what we were a couple of years back, especially with gig economy becoming very popular. I think that acceptance is coming in for the recruiters and for hiring managers to not see gap in the resumes negatively, versus seeing it positively, to understand what were the experiences that the individual went through in that gap and what have they learned from it, etc. So I think you should approach it as confidently as you describe any other experience in your resume. If you are asked at all why there was a gap, you can be confident enough to say why the gap was. and just end it as that. You first have to have that acceptance that the gap that you've taken added value to your life for certain reasons, and that it was absolutely okay. Once you have that acceptance, you will for sure not sound defensive about it. If you are questioned about it, just state it as a matter of fact and let it be. You do not have to get into providing reasons to us tell you why you took a particular gap, because all of us have our different stages of life. We have our own ways in which we're living. We have our challenges that we need to oversee. And I think people somewhere are becoming more conscious about it. So, like I said, first, make sure before you are stepping into an interaction, you accept the fact that you took a break because you needed it and there was nothing wrong with it. And second, narrate it as any other experience that you would on your resume, which is work related or any project related, any hobbies related. Just treat it the same way.
Thanks, Shikha. Very important, which you said, is to accept it first. Mohit, Shikha, any example you could share in which you would have come across any, person who talked about that gap in a very confident manner, and that probably added to, the overall experience of interviewing the person?
Okay, let me pick something which is closer home. So my own wife is currently on a break, and I can tell you for sure that it was a very difficult decision because of the same kind of apprehensions that how do I describe to my future recruiter that I wanted to take a break because I have never taken a break in the 8 years of my career. And this was a complete personal choice because she was feeling a little bit of a burnout, and she just wanted to give time to herself. uh, I'm happy to say that my own experience of working as someone who's associated with a program like this actually helped her give her tips that it is absolutely okay, and exactly what Shikha just mentioned. You don't have to be apologetic about it. You don't have to sugarcoat it to say that I wanted to experience something. Your reasons can be as personal as I wanted to take a break and travel. It can be absolutely anything. Uh, there is no and sometimes people try and say that I did some pro bono consulting work. If you really did that, great, but you don't always have to cover up by saying that maybe I will arrange for a certificate from someone just so that it doesn't look bad. It's absolutely okay. And I can understand it's a difficult decision because I've myself gone through that entire discussion, the journey in my own house. And I can totally understand why this question can come up in minds of anyone.
Yeah, and just to add to the whole idea of accepting that also came from somebody very close to me. So my sister-in-law, she's been a lawyer for the last 10 years, practicing straight out of her college, and she's recently relocated to Delhi. She took a break. She wanted to get back. COVID happened, etc., etc. So she couldn't. But every time I've spoken to her, she's never cited reason as COVID happened and I couldn't start my practice in Delhi again. She's very comfortable about the fact that I worked for 10 straight years. I practiced, I went through the grind, and after 10 years, I've got this break for whatever reason I did, and I'm enjoying that. And the fact that I'm enjoying that, the fact that I have time to do a lot of other things that probably in the last 10 years I did not, I want to continue doing it for some more time. And yes, I may get back to it by middle of this year, end of this year when I'm comfortable with it. But I have never heard her say that, COVID derailed my plans of getting back to work. She has that acceptance that I'm enjoying my phase of not working and I will get back to it when I want to. And I think that is something which is really important.
Thanks, Mohit and Shika, for sharing these examples, which are so close home and they really hit hard when you hear. Maybe I'll share one example. So, I was listening to this particular leader who was a director in a big FMCG and happened to be a female. And she had taken a 4-year gap in her career. And I love the way she described her gap. She said, and she was showing a presentation. She said that these 4 years were the best years of my life, and there was no, I mean, she was not defensive about it. She said these were downright the best years of my life. And I wish that we have more and more women and also men who think like that and who've gone through it. Because when you've gone through it, you can also empathize with the other person. So
Absolutely.
thanks for that great discussion. My next question is to Shikha. And like an insider question, Shikha, for you, being someone who's been in HR and interviewing people for almost a decade now, what are the top two or three things that you look for in a candidate? If this candidate has these two or three things, the candidate has completely wooed me, and I'm going to hire this person.
Okay, you're making us spill all our secrets here today. But since we promised to do that, I think one definitely what we look for is how strong you are in terms of sharing your understanding of what you've written on your resume, right? So if you're talking about certain work experiences and you're talking to us about it, I would want to understand what is the kind of depth that you have worked on it, because of course when we are interviewing for a role we would want to see what is your functional knowledge of that particular role, right? Because it has to be a win-win for you and me both. You need to, if you think you fit for the role and you're interviewing for us, you would want to understand the role and the organization well. So it's vice versa for us as well. We would also want to understand that if you've written certain things on your resume, certain projects you've worked on, how well have you done them, or how much in depth do you have the knowledge of what you have worked on, right? So that of course is something that I look for. That being said, if somebody is honest enough to say that we worked on a part of this project and this is what my understanding is, and the other part of the project was managed by a different team or a different incumbent and I may or may not know about it, I think that honesty is definitely appreciated. And in such a situation, I would probably, what I would look for is that what would you have done if you were doing it, or at least what is your thinking process on a particular thing, right? Because not everyone of us know everything. All of us step into new roles at some point in time in our life. It's more in terms of the outlook of what you do in that new role, what is the enthusiasm, or at least the thinking process that you have in mind that you're going into that role with. And then of course all of us can learn whatever we're doing in this world. Nothing is rocket science till it is a rocket science. So I think those are the top two things that I look for: understanding and the depth of the work that you've actually done. And for anything that you may not have done, what is your thinking process on that?
Right, Shika. Thanks for sharing that. And that's actually the whole point of having the BEI, or the behavioral event interview questions, where they ask you about, what would you have done in this situation, or describe a situation like this. Mohit, anything to share with us?
I'll just add two more pointers to it, Sulinga. First is I also look for the right intent, and the intent is exactly how what Shika also described it. Details, but details coupled with the why. That if you did something, you may have done it in a lot of depth, but what was the larger purpose? Were you trying to improve market share? Were you trying to improve productivity? Were you trying to save costs? Why did you really do this? So, through your answers, you can always bring out the intent with which you approached it. Your thoroughness, your detail orientation, all of this are, let's say, subsets of the intent that you show. Second, I also try and see, did you do or did you pick up something which is other than the ordinary? And I'm not talking about, again, to use Shikha's words, rocket science innovations. I'm talking about, were you able to think differently than your predecessor? Were you able to think slightly differently than your peers? That made your solution slightly better. And even if it is incrementally better, but that also just shows your mental agility, the ability to think a little wider and not just keep doing the same thing and hoping for the different outcome. So all of it really comes when you share more and more examples and the depth. So these two things are in addition to what Shikha mentioned.
Thanks for sharing that, Mohit. I think what you've talked about, the larger picture, it really helps you understand if the person is just focused on doing what he or she has been asked to do, or are they thinking broader? Also, sometimes what helps is if you have, two or three insights which are new to the interviewer, because sometimes, it's also like an aha moment for the interviewer, and the interviewer also takes back something. So when that happens, you kind of clicked it, because the interviewers learned something from you that might actually get you a lot of brownie points. So thanks for sharing that with Anshika.
And can
um,
I give you one secret as well? I think it also helps if you talk about the organization while quoting examples. So just to make you relate, we were interviewing a digital manager once who was in conversation with a marketing director, and in that conversation, he sort of gave us a very hard feedback on one of the campaigns that we had launched. Not a positive feedback, but that actually also led to the marketing director being very impressed with him, right? Because while it was not a very positive feedback, he actually gave it very constructively, told us what we could have done better, etc. So while you also talk of experiences that you may have, if you've observed the organization, especially with regard to the role that you're interviewing for, make sure you put it across, because for us, it's always, like you said, Salinga, it's always an aha moment if somebody talks to us about something that we've done really well or something that we could have also done better as an organization. And it also goes to show that, the intent that Mohit was talking about, it also goes to show that you really are looking forward to working with us. So
that's wonderful feedback, Shikha. I'm sure it shows that the person is someone who thinks critically. So thanks a lot for sharing that. My next question to Mohit, again, a slightly personal question. That Mohit, there are so many interviews that you would have taken, and there would be interviews you would have given also. So, if I have to ask you to share your memory of the best interviews that you have taken and you have given, and why were they the best, what would those be?
Okay, I hope my manager is not listening to it, but let me. Okay, so I think the best interview, and I will not talk about a single interview. I think it was a series of interviews, and I think it was by far hands down with Amazon. And it is not primarily because of the questions, but the process itself. So, firstly, and there are two things. Firstly, I think every interviewer seemed to have been trained to take the interview, because there are certain leadership behaviors which are core to Amazon, and they really push you hard to, and everyone structures their questions around those leadership behaviors. So everyone everyone's questions, and that's point number two. Everyone's questions make you think so deep, so hard that it just pushes your boundaries. When I had approached it, I remember I met them maybe 6 years ago. But I still remember that, and one of my old colleagues who had happened to join them told me, these are the leadership behaviors. You don't need to prepare anything else other than this. And I was very happy that, it's almost like someone's given you a cheat sheet. But every question will be hinting at one of those behaviors, but they will have at least 4 to 5 follow-ups. So if you share an example, they will ask you why. They will again ask you why. Result, could it have been better? Did you do some benchmarking? So they will really, really expand the width of your thinking, and you really need to think hard. So if you're not thorough, you wouldn't really crack it there. So that's Amazon. In terms of what I've experienced here at RB, I can definitely share the most memorable one, because it stretched my boundaries as well as an interviewer. Uh, Although I had not been partnering the R&D organization then, but I was supposed to interview something for a role called fragrances manager. Now, I don't come with a technical background. And of course, I have no understanding what fragrances manager really means. I mean, I'm someone who can't differentiate between two perfumes, which is one is good, which one is bad. So that's my level of competence when it comes to fragrances. Uh, but due to some last minute change, I had to step in, and I was the only person in the room. So what made it memorable is because I kind of approached it to say I have nothing really to lose, but there is a lot that I can gain in terms of my own understanding of what does the person even do. And I limited myself to two things which I'm personally, I would say, good at, or maybe something that I can understand and appreciate. One is business linkage. What is the role? What is the impact that this role has on business? And secondly, what is the procedural approach that the person follows when faced with a particular problem? Now, you don't need a technical understanding for this, but by doing this, I could engage the person to give out answers which I could comprehend, I could answer. And that's really, when you're talking about someone coming in to interview, you ultimately want them to do well for the business. And that's what I really did, and I constrained myself for that. So, yeah, Amazon and fragrances manager.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Mohit. I think what you spoke about Amazon, it always gave me a feeling that I have a syllabus, because we are so trained to think like students, like, this is a syllabus and kind of learn it up. I think what I can also share is that while maybe Amazon would have been vocal about it, which is great, a lot of organizations also evaluate people on these core values or these agilities, etc. Like we ourselves have a certain framework that we follow. So do you think it would help to, quickly go through the core values of any company beforehand, or do you think any kind of research should be done? Suppose you're interviewing for XYZ company.
I think homework always helps. Get to know the brands, get to know one or two key people who work there, maybe the top position. Get to know what the organization or what the brands really stand for. Sometimes even the brands have a purpose or a value associated with them. Or if there are any key milestones that the organization has gone, is there any restructuring, takeovers, any new product launches that the organization has done? So background or homework really helps because you can weave them into your answer. Like Shikha just mentioned that someone talked about a recent campaign that RB had done and gave critical feedback. That strongly talks about the homework that you've done. And values, of course. It helps you, everything will help you structure your answer better. You don't have to force fit it, but maybe there are aspects of your own personality or of aspects of your own experience that you can weave into it, make the conversation or to make the example a little richer. So yeah, definitely helpful. But anyway, I am not going to leave it at that. I would also want to hear Shikha. What are the best interviews that she's been part of?
Yeah, because you guys have the same manager, so you want to play team.
Yes. Oh, well, I'd say I've not given a lot because I've been, I would say, bread and RB for a long time. Um, but I think few that I have seen being taken, I think one of the best that I did with one of the managers was when the candidate asked the manager, you settle down, you ask the candidate, how are you? Question is given back to you. Instead of just saying, I'm fine, and then getting into the interview, the manager said, I'm good. I just finished watching a match yesterday, XYZ reasons, described a little bit on what, he had done in the day. That led to a 5-10 minutes conversation before we actually started the interview, which put everybody in a sort of a relaxed place, got to know each other. And I think that was a really good thing to do, which I made sure that I practice. And hopefully it puts the other person, a person on the other side of the table in the same position as it made me feel a few years back. In terms of the interviews that I've taken, I think something that I now prepare for, because I wasn't at that point in time, was that I was interviewed back by the candidate, right? To understand that, what does the organization look for? What is this that, after the interaction, I was actually asked, do you think I'll be able to add value to the role? Or what kind of incumbent am I looking for the role? What would be my future career path? So while I took the interview for half an hour, I spent the next 15 minutes giving an interview back. And I think that was one of a really refreshing experience and I had. And I make sure I prepare on all of these questions I take going forward. So
I think we all love any person who's done their homework because it just shows the intent of the person. The person is really interested. There are often candidates who would look up your LinkedIn or, look up what you've done and maybe quote those instances while you're giving answers that, since you've also done this, you would understand. So I think we all love flattery. So why not just do a quick check of LinkedIn and figure out what the person has done in the past. Okay, one question maybe. What's maybe the worst kind of interview you've taken or given? Just a quick one, if any one of you could answer.
Mohit, you want to go ahead?
Didn't I stumble?
I'm just thinking. Uh, I think the worst is and it was not so long ago, wherein someone did not know the products that RB makes, and I'm not talking about small products. I'm talking about big international brands that we have.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and the product in question was Lysol. So they did not know that. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, Lysol. So we had to tell that it's a cleaner. So I think that's the level of basic preparedness that we would expect. So it did not go down well with the interviewer. Let me just put it a little mildly, because as a employee, you are also proud of the products that you make, but that really didn't go well.
Great. I hope that person is listening and maybe next time knows that you get the products well. But thanks for sharing all those tips and tricks and tips. And I'm sure there are certain things that people have noted down and which will help them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take some questions. So I see one question on the screen. Avnika asks, is there a trick wherein one can be convincing enough for a role for which they have theoretical knowledge but no work experience?
You
Anyone
want
of
me to?
Sorry, go ahead. I'll add it.
Okay. So I would just say one simple thing. Always start off by saying that I have not done this, but based on my reading or based on my understanding, let me make an honest attempt at it. So the interviewer knows that you are talking from experience that is not, that is not really a handy experience. That's not something that you've yourself done. Uh, State the assumptions that you've taken before arriving at. I'm assuming that someone's given you a challenge, someone's given you a problem statement, or asked how would you approach it. Say that, okay, assuming these 2 and 3 things, I would want to approach it like this. And it's absolutely okay to say that you don't know, because if you make a half-hearted stab at a question, you will automatically sound unconvincing and not so confident. So yeah, in a nutshell, stating that you're doing it with a theoretical understanding, and stating the assumptions, 2 things that will really help you sail through.
Great tip, Mohit.
Shikha?
Actually, what might actually happen is that when you give that half-hearted answer, the rest of the interview that has gone well could actually start looking bad because now the interviewer knows she's bluffing me or he's bluffing me. So, Shikha, you want to add something on top of that?
I think what you could also do is, so one, of course, like Mohit says, very important to state it upfront that you don't have practical knowledge of it, only theoretical, and that you'll take an attempt at it. If possible, if the question is such, maybe pick up something that the organization has done, or you think happens in the organization, and using your theoretical knowledge, give a view on that, if it's feasible at all. Because that way you'll actually be able to connect to something and then talk about it. So that's one of the ways that you could approach it as well.
Great. Thanks. So, I have another question. This question says that I left my job in 2009 because of a family emergency to take care of family. It was traumatic and led to depression, and I had health issues. I was not comfortable talking about that. All of these were very difficult to talk about, and my health did not let me apply for a job for a far off location, which would usually be the case. And I was not comfortable talking about, the mental health issues. Um, I switched to Android app development so that I could have my. Sorry, the question just disappeared. Yeah, so I switched to Android app development so that I could have my own enterprise, and it was easier to work from home compared to my job in telecom, which did not let me work from home. During my gap of 5.5 years, I did a non-tech freelancing work. This really brings down my confidence, especially when I have to negotiate pay. I started getting interviews in 2016, but when I started applying back in 2012 and 2013 and 2014, the experiences were discouraging. Even in 2016, I had people. The question is kind of cut off.
So
I think the
yeah,
basic question here. Yeah, if
I get
Mohit
a broad sense of
yes.
I get a broad sense of I think what the person is trying to ask. So one is if you're not comfortable, and I will answer it in two parts. One is the discomfort of sharing your personal situation. It's okay to say that I'm not comfortable talking about it because it's very personal to me. And sorry, I think it says I was offered a job. My employer was willing to. Heartbreaking, and I had to resign. So, see, these are unfortunate experiences that a lot of people in the job market have had to go through. So, I'm not averse to these experiences because you do get to hear something like this. So, like I was saying earlier, firstly, don't be apologetic. You don't have to share details if you're not comfortable. You need to operate with an optimistic mindset that if the organization is really invested in the program, then they would understand your situation and try to do their best. There will, of course, be organizations who would want to take advantage of your situation, like it seems to be the case here. How can you maybe turn the situation to your advantage? I think be very clear of what the expectations from the role are. Don't just apply it to anything that seems remotely related. Because if you don't have the relevant exposure, especially in technical roles, there are chances that people may not be willing to take that bet because it's a large market with a lot of ample available talent for every organization. So, firstly, you need to be sure of what you want to do. If you are sure that Android app development is something which is my calling, and this is a field I want to create my career in, please go ahead full steam on that. But don't compromise on what you think is good for you. So that's something that I would really, really urge you to. Shika, if you have anything to add.
Yep, I think first and foremost, to give reasons, like we spoke of your break. You can just say that you've taken a break because of medical conditions, and that's it. You don't have to talk about it. If you are asked, which would be quite a fun, in certain situations, the employers may. You can always say that you're not comfortable talking about it, or it's something that does not impact you now, and you're not comfortable sharing details. I think an answer of that sort would be good enough. Like Mohit said, with regard to your experience in the job market, these experiences do happen and they are quite unfortunate. But to ensure that you don't go through it again, I would only say, and I hope that you're already doing it. If not, make sure you do that. Whatever freelancing work that you've done, it is still work that you've done. It's an experience that you hold. Make sure you talk about it in detail in the resume that you're putting in, right? Because when I am looking at a profile as an employer, and even if it's a freelance work, but it's a good freelance work, I can see that the experiences that you've had in those freelancing job would still add value to what I have on the table. I would still want to go ahead and have an interaction with you, right? Because it adds to the talent that I am looking for. So make sure you talk up your freelancing work in the same way that you would do to an on-roll employee job with any other organization.
Great. Thanks for that, Mohit and Shika. There's a question which says that since we are working in a remote world, how can I ask if I don't want to relocate and want to work remotely? I think this is a valid
Just
question with
as you
the
asked us.
hybrid models coming
I
in.
would say just as you asked right now, ask for it. There is no other way to ask. Like Sulinga said, all of us are working in hybrid models. I'm sure organizations are thinking about it. New ways of working. How do you place people? Because as an organization, we also want to maintain that safety at our workplace, right? So just ask. There's no other way of asking.
Thanks, Shikha, for that straight and clean answer. I think that's the right approach. Another question says that I took a break 7 years ago, started my own business. Last year, the business was shut down due to COVID, and now I want to return. I've appeared for some interviews, but I'm always asked, will you be able to assimilate back after working for yourself for so many years? For so many years, you've been your own boss. So, how would you go about it? What's your take, Shikha and Mohit?
Okay, so if this question was asked to me, I would rather than answering, that how after being my own boss, how would I answer to somebody else? I would spin it and answer it in a way that what are the things I learned when I was an entrepreneur? Like, what are the qualities I had? I was organized. I knew how to manage conflict. I knew how to manage last minute deadlines, XYZ things. And this is what I bring to the table, right? I know how to work independently. I know ownership. And as long as I am able to focus on my work with the same kind of qualities, I really don't think whether I'm working on my own or I'm working under a boss really matters, because at the end of the day, all of us are trying to achieve an organizational goal, an idea or a revenue or a result that we're all gunning towards. So rather than answering, whether I will be comfortable or not comfortable answering to someone, I would use this opportunity to highlight what I bring to the table and how I will add to the organization.
Mohit,
Mohit?
any additions from your end?
No, could not have been answered better. I think that's the way to go. Talk about your what is it that you bring onto the table, rather than stepping back and justifying. I think that's the best way to go.
Great. Sometimes I feel these questions are also there to just hear out from the candidate that the candidate will do it. That just a positive reinforcement that the interviewer might want to hear. So I don't think we should take too much of tension on these questions. So there's another question that I have over 15 years of experience and a 5+ year break. What is the right way to handle a salary discussion when moving from business to job? I think both Mohita and Shika would have had multiple negotiation, salary discussions. Your views would be very helpful here.
Always understand that in established organizations there is always a pay band. So all of us, all three of us, Sulinga, Shikha, myself, we are at certain designations, certain pay bands in the organization, and there's a pay range that is defined. If the role is exciting, uh, go for the role. Uh, and you need to check whether the seniority level in that organization meets your own expectations or not. I think pay is a natural outcome. Most established organizations will pay you fairly and will pay you for the job. Somehow, I think sometimes we are also personally very constrained, thinking I am from 2010 batch, I am from 2015 batch. What is it that my peers are drawing in the market? Uh, the organization doesn't pay for what your peers are drawing, but what is the job that you do? So if the job is something that you like, I would personally say trust the organization to be fair, and bring you at parity. And mostly, compensation is something which is openly shared. So you may not always know what is your positioning, but as long as they are paying you fairly and which is a fair market value for that job, I think that should be acceptable.
And Mohit, how is it okay as a candidate? Is it okay to ask the HR or whoever is negotiating about these compensation bands, etc.? How should a candidate go? How would you know that that there's this system which exists in in the company or not?
Um, See, I don't think the HR or anyone in the organization would be open to share because all of these are confidential numbers. But you can always outline your expectation very, very openly. That bringing in 15 years of experience, uh, and not just 15 years of experience, but relevant skills that are required for the job. Bringing all of that on the table, there would be certain expectations, and you would want to be fairly compensated for it. Uh, I would say partly it's also mutual trust that has to play. And if it is a long term association that you want to have with the organization in the question, I'm sure eventually it will all work out.
Great, thank you. So I think that's it. I don't see any more questions. Thanks, Shikha, and thanks, Mohit, for this for the time that you've given. And I'm getting a lot of thank yous in the comments. I'm sure people have benefited from it. Uh, Thank you, and hope to see you again with another series from Reboot. We all three of us are from Reckitt, and diversity inclusion always rests at our heart, and that's our constant endeavor. So, see you guys very soon. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Been a pleasure.